Hello, 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 and welcome to 52 Weeks of Flow, the podcast that delves into the depth of human potential and the transformative power of flow. On this show, we talk about peak performance, flow, energy, and bridge the gap between science and woo-woo. Through authentic stories and real-life examples, my guests and I will help you dive into your superpowers and create your next level of success. My name is Bea-Marie, neuroscience geek, flow enthusiast, and your guide to rewilding yourself. I'm on a mission to raise the frequency of the planet by supporting you to untame yourself and step into your flow. Let's ditch the boss babe era and say hello to the soft feminine CEO era. Today, we have an incredible guest, Samantha J. She is an award-winning entrepreneur hailed as the Illuminator by Forbes. By the age of 22, Samantha built a multi-eight-figure empire, overcoming immense personal challenges. Her unique Illuminator Method empowers entrepreneurs globally to find deep fulfillment and success. And I cannot wait to dive into all of that. So, welcome to the stage, Samantha J.
Hello, it's so good to be here.
And I am so excited to have you here. So, let's dive right in. Like we don't do easy here. No, actually we do. Actually, we do easy. We love everything that just flows. So tell me, 22 is a magical number. How do you think you accomplished what you have accomplished by the age of 22?
I think a deep awareness of my purpose from a really, really young age. I think the stronger your connection to your purpose, the easier your fears and your insecurities start to become really irrelevant. And I had that purpose. I remember looking at the front page of the newspaper and seeing the words, the forgotten suburb. And when I saw those words, the forgotten suburb, I remember really struggling with my own sense of belonging at that age. I was really torn between, shit, do I be the version of myself that's like, trying to fit into this world, or do I be true to myself and, belong to myself? And at that stage, I got so connected to that group of people that felt forgotten in this community. And I started to build property developments that help people with their mental well-being, that gave them a sense of community and connection. And that just helped me to stop looking at my own fears and insecurities and start to think about that purpose that was way larger than myself.
Wow. I did not expect that answer, because that, like, being so conscious about, your own path, about your own insecurities, about what you have to bring into this world, that is pretty rare. So did you always have that? Were you always like this child that thinks outside the box, that, that just feels deeper than others?
Yeah, like my earliest memories, most of the time I actually thought there was something wrong with me because I felt things so freaking deeply. And my awareness, my kind of that philosophical side of me, it was just always there from a really young age. When the other kids were like, let's go play with Barbies, I'm like, I don't want to play with Barbies. Like I want to like sit with the adults and like have philosophical conversations. And like in my spare time, I was looking up different people who were like world leaders, having these like conversations, wanting to make a difference. And so I think from a really young age, I just always had a passion, always had this deep knowing that I was going to be here to change the world, that I wanted to do something really meaningful with my life. And that was great when I was, I guess, around other people that had them same passions. But a lot of the time in the first 20 years of my life, that really caused so much internal stress, anxiety, because I really struggled to find other people that thought the same way that I did, that felt the same way. And in my household, I would kind of like see the future before it would happen. I had these kind of gifts that only I would begin to understand, I guess, by the time I was 22, when I started to understand I was a medicine woman. But in my childhood, I was feeling things so deeply. I could see things happen before they were going to. And that came with a lot of struggle for those first 20 years, going, oh, is there something wrong with me? Because my parents didn't in any way understand it. And they would often just say I would cry as a little girl, like, in my emotions or as these things were happening. And they were like, go to your bedroom. And I was like, having those things shut down for such a long time, it caused me to just go to things like drugs, alcohol, as a way to try to numb just how sensitive I was as a young girl.
Oh, yes. And there you're touching a really, really, really sensitive point there. Because when we try not to feel, when we try not to be ourselves, we pick up things, that not society, but that the world basically gives us to numb ourselves. We binge watch, we drink, we overeat. So what was it for you that you decided, okay, this is not what I'm supposed to do? Like when was the point that you said, I have something bigger to do?
Sorry, lovely. It was just cutting out then. Do you mind repeating that question?
Yeah, sure. No problem. I was just wondering, since the world tells us, or the world gives us a lot of tools to numb ourselves, like binge watching, like drinking, like overeating. Like, when was the time for you that you decided, or when was the epiphany, or I don't know what it was for you, but what was it for you that you thought, okay, I have something bigger to do in this world. I need to stop.
Sorry, it was just cutting in and out, but I think I got the gist of the question, which was, what was that epiphany moment where I knew that there was something bigger for me that helped me to stop with the drugs and alcohol? Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Okay, I remember this really distinct moment. And this is kind of like the most shameful moment of my life. I didn't talk about this moment for a really long time. But I remember at the peak of my success after becoming an award-winning entrepreneur, I remember, I guess, with all that success that came and all the attention, I was constantly in the media. It also came with a downside of jealousy, envy, and abuse from the people I love that were close to me as well. And so as all of that was happening, and I was kind of like being, on the one side, I was like successful and I was helping people. On the other side, I was getting abused for this success. And it was really tough, because in that moment, I felt like, shit, it's not safe to be me. There's so much hurt and pain that I'm experiencing as I'm shining so brightly in this moment. To cope with that, I kind of went down that partying scene, and I was going and I was just drinking a lot to kind of cope with that. And I remember one night just drinking so much that I hurt myself. And I remember I was in the hospital, and it was in that moment that I realized my dad was there, and he said to me, like, you don't have to do this anymore. Like, I see you. And that's kind of been a recurring theme in my life for me, is that in that moment, my dad really saw me, and he really just knew that those behaviors weren't true to me. They were just simply a way to cope with me not knowing how to tell the people that were close to me who were abusing me, like, how to stop. And because one of the weaknesses that I have is I have a lot of compassion and empathy for people. So whilst they were hurting me and abusing me, I was like, I get why you're doing that to me, and it's okay. Like, I just didn't know. And in that moment, my dad's like, you don't have to do this anymore. And I think I just felt so seen, and I was like, I need your help to be able to stop these people that are close to me who are abusing me in this moment. And that's when I really opened up to him, and I allowed him to just see how much pain this was causing me. And he began to, I guess, protect me and stand up, because these people were in my family. And when you're creating so much which you think is going to be benefiting people, and also then they respond with abuse, it's like, it's really tough. And sometimes you don't know how to protect yourself, because you want the best for everybody. So that was the turning point, was, I guess, asking for help, being vulnerable, also admitting that I'm 22 years old and I don't know how to get myself out of this situation in this family dynamic. And my dad really stood up for me then. And that was really what helped me to, I guess, begin to get out of that situation and know that I don't have to do the alcohol and drugs as a coping, is that I can be more vulnerable with my dad and ask for help and support out of it.
Whew. Oh, wow. You just touched me there really, really deeply. Because I had this kind of relationship with my dad as well. Like, he was also he also protected me from a lot of things, knowing or unknowingly.
Mm.
You know, and I love that you took the courage to open up.
Mm.
That sometimes is missing in our society.
Mm.
You know, that we are vulnerable, that this is actually a superpower to be vulnerable. It shouldn't be like, I cannot stress this enough. You know, we should not say that vulnerability is a superpower, or vulnerability is something that is special. It should be normal. Vulnerability should be something that everyone expresses on a daily basis.
Mm.
But right now, it is still this, wow, you're vulnerable, wow, you're opening up, wow effect kind of thing. So thank you so much for sharing this, because there are a lot of people out there who probably need to hear that.
Yeah. And, to the people out there who have always been naturally vulnerable, which is who I am, however, have had experiences, narcissism being one of them, where in that moment of being vulnerable, like your vulnerability was used against you, it was used to exploit you. I think that one of the wisdoms around vulnerability now is discernment. And it's that discernment to know, are you a safe space for my vulnerability, or are you somebody who will exploit it? And this isn't like a trauma response. It's like something that I've had to learn I'm naturally like an oversharer, naturally so open. Like, that's just my natural nature. And I'm sure everybody on here is natural nature for many people, probably. But there's a level of discernment I now have around vulnerability, that vulnerability is something that must also come with discernment, because we have also people without awareness that also can use vulnerability as a means for exploitation and abuse as well. And I think that's such an important message to also talk about as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I read something, I read about a mantra that that you have, and it's, when spirit calls, I answer. And when I call spirit, spirit answers.
Yes.
And you also said earlier that you are, or became aware that you are a medicine woman. Can you talk to that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So by the time I was 22 years old, when I became that multi-eight-figure award-winning entrepreneur, I did feel a level of emptiness and like something was missing then. So I remember this moment when I had won that award, kind of coming home and breaking down on the shower. It was raining in this quite dramatic moment, and I'm like, why God, I felt like since my earliest memories, I knew I was here for big and bright, beautiful things. But I mean, if this is how it's really gonna feel, like, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. And that's in that moment where I guess I surrendered my life, who I'm here to be, over to God. And I said, like, show me the way. Like, if I need some divine intervention over the next week, otherwise or the next weeks, otherwise I got in such a dark place that I was like planning suicide. You know, I kind of, it just was, quite a dark place I was in. And then I found myself at a business coaching meeting, and my business coach was there. And this was a few days after I'd made that plea. And he said, I've got someone who knows they need to speak to you. And I was like, oh. And he said, I'm working with somebody. He's a shaman, and he just knows you're going through some things apparently, and he wants to talk to you. And I was like, what? Oh my God, this is the divine intervention. And so I went outside, gave him a call, and he's like, you really need my help, don't you? Now, this guy lived thousands of kilometers away from me, never had spoken to him in my life, but that was the start of my shamanic journey. That darkness that I'd always felt, that struggle I'd known since a very young age, in time I began to remember was me being sexually abused as a young girl. And so that darkness, that emptiness, that kind of thing I was trying to run away from a lot of my life, it was this darkness of my shadow, of the pain, of the trauma. And I kind of hated that. You know, when I went into this darkness that existed inside of me, it was filled with self-hatred, self-guilt of like, you know, I hate you. You did something wrong to create this sexual abuse. And so the anger wasn't so much towards the perpetrator. It was more towards myself. Like, you did something wrong. There's something wrong with you. How did you, you know, all this judgment towards this 3-year-old me that went through that experience. And that was what was underneath the self-abuse cycles. And a lot of the time when I've experienced then abuse in my life, you know, I attracted that to become conscious of that event from a very young age. And when I became conscious of it, I asked God, I was like, what's the highest purpose for why this came into my life? And it was because I was here to help thousands, millions of people through entrepreneurship, to turn their adversity into opportunity. And now I have a vision to, you know, end child sex trafficking, all because I went through that experience.
Yeah. This is so powerful. And it's at the same time so interesting that you had this narrative about yourself, you know, when you were 3 years old, that you were actually the aggressor in a way because you did something wrong. We always blame the victim. You know, that woman, her skirt was too short. No wonder that the man couldn't hold on to himself. Or, you know, she was way too loud. She was way too expressive. And of course that happened in a way. Mm-hmm. Instead of looking for the responsibility at people who are responsible for it.
Yes.
And to actually take responsibility for our own actions. Mm-hmm. You know, when we blame, why do we blame? Mm-hmm. So when I remember when I was like in my early teens, I have to say, when I was 14, I went to the club for the first time. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I heard all those stories, and my parents were like, hey, you know, I know you're sleeping at your friend's house, but just, you know, be mindful. Be mindful what you guys do. So we went clubbing, and I always had this narrative in my head when I saw girls who were really short skirts. I was like, oh, they're getting in trouble. Oh, they want it. That's why they're doing it. Mm. But I didn't question that narrative for such a long time. Mm. And we have been fed certain narratives from a very, very young age on. Like, you need to hustle, you need to grind, you need to, you know, work yourself into burnout. Only then you are successful. Mm-hmm. And here we come to your other mission, you know, coming from the 8-figure boss babe into the soft feminine CEO. Like,
Yeah.
When did that shift happen?
I think when I got into the work of the medicine woman work, it was very much a time of what I'd call my divine feminine awakening, of where because of the sexual abuse, because of all this other abuse I'd experienced in my life, I began to develop these hard masks, this protective armor, like, because when I was that free, open, sensual Sam, it was like, well, that's when you get abused. That's when, similar to what you were saying, the short skirts, you're going to attract unwanted attention. People are going to think you want it, and I was like, far out. Like, I just, but I'm just wanting to be me, I'm just wanting to share love and be open and sensual and just expressive. And, I was like that from a really young age. And so, yeah, that was really the remembrance of who I was underneath the persona of who I developed myself into to cope with that trauma. And once I became conscious of, the disconnection, the endometriosis, uh, the kind of level of numbness that I was feeling underneath all of those armors, I did a 500-hour womb awakening apprenticeship and all of these sacred sexuality trainings, and I trained in tantra and all of this stuff. And I was like, you know what? Like, I get to create a level of protection, but it's not going to come through not being me. It's going to come through knowing knowing how to say in my body, fuck no and fuck yes, like being connected to my womb, being able to say fuck no, fuck yes, have strong boundaries, but I'm not going to have these different armors and protective masks and be this boss babe and overwork and all these things to protect myself anymore. I began to connect into a deeper level of my power and know how to protect myself in a way that didn't abandon my authenticity anymore. So that was really when I began to connect into my femininity and, what felt good in my body. And I began to soften and just ask myself, how can I build the empire of my dreams, but only working a few hours a week? And I began to move into that era a little bit more.
Ooh, I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. And at the same time, I have to ask, because diving into the feminine and really connecting to your feminine energy, because we talked on this podcast, we also talk a lot about masculine and feminine energy and that they need to be balanced and in harmony in us. So when you dove into this feminine part of you, when you discovered all of the sides of yourself, I was going to say, did you abandon your masculine? But that's not the right question. It's more like, where did you keep the masculine energy? Where did you keep the masculine power?
That's a really good question. There's an amazing book out there by Maureen Murdoch. She's a Jungian psychologist. It's called The Heroine's Journey. And I think that's the psychological quest for wholeness for a woman. And it's like it talks about abandoning your masculine energy and then having to forgive your mother as the role model for your feminine energy. And kind of then, after forgiving your mom for what she modeled and coming up with your own definition of healthy feminine energy, you then go through this period where you begin to integrate how your new version of healthy feminine is then integrated in your masculine. And so I remember I went so deep into the feminine that it was like a strong no to even work. I was like, but I don't want to work. I don't want to build an empire. I don't want to go to the gym. I just want to do yoga and I just want to be in my feminine flow all the time. And then I was like, then I realized, okay, I've gone a bit too far here. Need to integrate it. And that's when I've begun to now, it's kind of like I feel like I'm like a piano. I can just like be any single chord at any time. And I feel like I can draw upon that range. And I've been able to create such this dynamic ability to now be able to be in my healthy feminine or masculine. And that's really now cemented in my routine that helps me to be balanced in both.
Ooh, awesome. And how do you know that you are out of balance? Like, what are for you the trigger points where you're like, oh, okay, I need to shift?
Yeah, I think the biggest trigger point would be anxiety. Yeah, anxiety for me, if I can't feel my belly because I'm like, that can be it for sure. I think not getting enough sleep, noticing this part of me that's just very on all the time and not wanting to slow down, not getting enough sleep. I think not being able to be connected to my emotions, like really struggling to just feel my emotion and maybe wanting to not be with them as well. Um, yeah, but to be honest, like I have times in my life where I'm really in my masculine, and that can be at the time of month with my menstruation as well. And then there's other times where I'm more in my feminine. So I haven't found that it's like 50-50. It's more just really maintaining that connection to myself and noticing what's true and aligned today and staying authentic to that.
Yeah, beautiful. I also love the term harmony over balance, because
Yes.
balance is always like this fragile thing, where you're on your tiptoe and you're like, almost ready to fall. Whereby
Yeah.
harmony is this integration. Sometimes, like you said, sometimes it's more this, sometimes it's more that, but it's never overpowering.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. That's it.
Awesome. So, one more thing. You said earlier that you are when you learned what your purpose is, when you connected to your purpose and you decided that you are going to build an empire,
Mhm.
like, and then changed it into this healthy version of empire. Like, where are you going? What are you doing? What are you creating? What is the world going to see from you?
Oh my God, this is my favorite question. I love it. So my biggest mission is to create 1 billion philanthropic impacts. And that's really about protecting the next generation children. We've got less than 10 years before irreversible damage to the planet with climate change. We've got the highest rates of mental health challenges, a sex trafficking epidemic on our doorstep. I had to overcome body dysmorphia, and it terrifies me about social media these days, and also the sexual conditioning and programming where have so much pressure on them around beauty and their sexuality through social media, through AI. So very much it's about how can I become a leader who's growing my influence for impact, not vanity. How can I be on the world stage and be an example as a millennial trailblazer and purpose-led leader who is being a model for different values, not vanity, superficial values, but helping the next generation see that our value is in our spiritual connection, in our heart-centered leadership, in our humanitarianism, not just in our looks and beauty and sexuality. And so the longer term vision is to create like the Illuminate Center of Entrepreneurship, creating this movement of the next generation of leaders who are merging purpose and profit so that every time somebody buys from them, it's also contributing to a philanthropic cause and that we can unify the world. I've lived in places like Africa, and one of the things that as I've traveled around Africa, Nepal, is that, a lot of the places out there, women's value is down to her body or marriage. She's traded for a few lambs. And, we often don't think about it unless we've traveled. But as a Western woman, we can be the change. We can help these women that are caught in these disadvantaged communities to break free of the poverty cycle, to give them education, to give them skills, to give them a voice, to give them, even them having the opportunity to be on somebody's podcast over in the West, or even just sell to one person. The currency change is huge. So the bigger change in the future is really giving those women over there a platform to use their voice for change and to bring awareness, to write books, to get on stages, and to unify the world in this way.
Oh, yes. I want to play like clapping hands and cheering and yes, yes, yes. And when you were speaking, I thought I'm probably going to butcher this, and I don't know if it was Gandhi or if it was the Dalai Lama, but one of the two said that Western women are going to save the world. And
Yes.
most men that I talked to and heard this quote said, "Oh, really? Like Western women? Why is it Western women?" And I was like, "Wow, because we have the knowledge and the opportunities. We fought so much, or our mothers and grandmothers fought so much to have this opportunity to speak out for all the women of the world."
Yeah, 100%. I can see you're, like, lit up. I can see you're like, I'm one of these women."
Yes. Yes, I'm totally with you on this, because this is also my call. I'm also supporting a cause in Ghana where they help help women, create their own businesses and give them business coaching and entrepreneurial advice and all of this. So I it's this thing about, you can give somebody a fish, or you can tell them, or you can teach them how to fish to be
Yes.
more sustainable. And I just love your cause. I just love everything that you do. I love your fire. And I'm extremely grateful that you are here and that you're sharing this with everybody. So if we're going really, 3D now, it is really early where you are. And we're
Yes.
talking about flow. We're talking about passion. We're talking about purpose. But we also wake up in the morning and we start our day. So, how do you start your day to really get into your purpose work, to really get into the highest version of yourself?
Yes, I love this question. I always start my day with myself. What's true and authentic for me today to fill my own cup up? And that often involves connecting into the version of Sam at the end of her life on her deathbed. What has she done? What is she grateful for? Who's she become? Because I always think that we often underestimate what we can do in 10 years, overestimate what we can do in 1 year, and we don't actually know how much time we have. And so I love to connect to the version of myself at the end of my deathbed. Who is she? It helps me to, bring her into today and respond to life today, connected to her, and to, ask myself, how can I make a let's fucking go move today? Right? Which is essentially, how can I live without regrets today, not get stuck in my head, and just think, okay, well, what if I only had today? What's the let's fucking go move that I need to make? Where can I just take action? Where can I just get out of my head, trust my heart, trust my intuition? Where is spirit calling me today? Who do I need to be? What do I need to do? What's the message I need to share today? And that just gets me activated and inspired and to move out of my own way and to get connected to that purpose of myself. And that's the thing that really activates me in the morning.
That's incredible. So that's your morning coffee, basically.
Pretty much. I also do drink a coffee. But, even probably as you can tell, even as I'm connecting into that vision, it's so clear to me, and I feel the sense of gratitude in my heart of that woman who achieved all those things, who she's got a family around her, and my heart's just so full when I connect to her in that vision that I just come alive, and then I bring that feeling of aliveness throughout my day.
Ooh, all right. Everybody who is listening at the moment, wherever you are in your day, I want you to take a minute after this podcast, or you can also pause it right now. Like, take a moment and really close your eyes, put your hands on your heart if you want to, and imagine that woman, that man, that person that you are going to be on your deathbed. Like what Samantha just shared, what she just said, connect to that version of yourself. And do that for 10 minutes, do that for a minute, do that for 10 seconds, but just connect to that person. Because if you are watching this right now, I mean, if you're only listening to it, but you could hear the shift in Samantha's voice. I could see it right now. You lit up. There was so much more excitement, like you were already beaming, but now you're like radiating. And so if you can't have a minute, then really do this right now for yourself and for the rest of your day. Because when you do that, you probably also are going to shine brighter and ignite other people as well.
Yeah.
So one more thing before we go. I could talk to you forever because this is so exciting. One more thing before we go. If you would have one piece of advice to share with somebody, what would that be?
Invest in an inner circle as soon as possible. You know, I think one of the downfalls I've had as a boss babe is I'm like, I can do it alone. And I think it's been a huge downfall of mine because I haven't been able to enjoy the journey with as many people along the way. A lot of the time I have, as my success has grown, experience like tall poppy syndrome, envy, jealousy. And I think I just could have been so much more supported, celebrated. So invest in an inner circle, like, and in that community, and focus on enjoying the journey, receiving more help and support along the way.
Awesome. Yes. Yes to the inner circle.
Yes.
All right. So where can people connect to you? Because we haven't even touched the Illuminator Method yet, but if people are interested to learn more about that, where can they learn more about it? And yeah, tell me all about it.
Yeah, so follow me on Instagram, i.m.samantha.j. You can DM me free book, and then I'll give you a copy of all my best-selling books as well. And yeah, I also have a program, the Illuminator Society, so that's on there as well if you wanted to find out more about it.
That is freaking generous and awesome. And if you were not so fast listening to this or picking this up, all of those links will also be in the show notes or in the podcast in the episode description. Whoo, Samantha, thank you so much. Thank you. This was so enlightening.
Yeah, I had such an amazing time with you.
Woo! And that's it. That's it for today. That's our show. Thank you so much for tuning in and staying with us until the end. If you loved what you heard, what you saw, if you loved Samantha, then connect to her on Instagram, give her some love. And if you haven't yet, then subscribe to our newsletter at Bea@superwoman.coach, because there you get all the latest information, the juice, the beautiful stuff that we are creating here. And if you have 10 seconds, then please go rate and review the show. It would mean the world to me, and it would help me bring on more amazing guests like Samantha, who are changing the world, who are inspiring the masses, and who are just here to serve you for the highest good. And I'm giving you a virtual high five right now, because you are part of the 52 Weeks of Flow family. And stay tuned for next week's amazing episode. And until then, keep shining, keep learning, keep growing, and keep flowing.